Is Belarus about to play a new role in Russia's war in Ukraine? Ukraine's President Vladimir Zelenskyy seems to think so. He and other officials have been warning for weeks that Russia is preparing to use Belarus as the launchpad for a new front in the war. How big is the threat to Ukraine, and why now? Belarus's exiled opposition leader, Sviatlana Tsikhanouskaya, is in Kyiv right now. It's her first visit to the Ukrainian capital, and it comes at an important moment.
I'm here to emphasize that the Belarusian people support Ukraine's independence, sovereignty, and territorial integrity. We acknowledge that the regime in Minsk has made Belarus a participant in this aggression, but Lukashenko is a usurper who lost the elections. He does not represent Belarusians and serves only the interests of the Kremlin and Imperial Russia. Yet Belarus is not Russia.
I'm joined now by Sviatlana Tsikhanouskaya's chief of staff, Franak Viacorka. He's in Kyiv, accompanying her on this visit at the invitation of President Zelenskyy. Franak, good to see you. You and Ms. Tsikhanouskaya are there in Kyiv after Russia's biggest missile strike this year, with Moscow warning of more strikes to come. I just want to start by asking you how bad the damage is there in Kyiv.
We saw many devastated buildings this morning. Of course, Kyiv looks not so well, but the Ukrainians are rebuilding their infrastructure very quickly, very quickly. And today we are waiting for another attack. We are waiting also not a very calm night, next one. And security services already warned us that we have to be ready to go to shelter.
Let's talk about the warnings from Russian officials that Russia could open a new front from Belarus. This is obviously potentially a very new dimension to the war. Is that why Zelenskyy invited Belarus's opposition to Kyiv?
I think it was one of the reasons. Zelenskyy wanted to send a message to Lukashenko that the war must not escalate, that Belarus must not be used as the Russian launchpad again, as it happened in 2022. He wanted to show to Belarusian people that Ukraine stands with Belarusian democratic society, not with Lukashenko's regime. And of course, it's a strong message to international community. Pay attention to Belarus. Pay attention to what's happening in Belarus. Russia is building infrastructure. Russia is deploying nuclear weapons. Russia is deploying Oreshnik missiles on Belarus territory, and we need more sanctions, more pressure, more isolation on both dictators, Putin and Lukashenko.
What are Ukrainian officials telling you? Are they worried that the Belarusian army itself might attack this time?
Today we had very long negotiations with Minister Sybiga, almost 3 hours. Sviatlana Tsikhanouskaya spoke with him, first privately, then with the delegation. We discussed the possible threats, we discussed situation on the border, we discussed the response to Lukashenko's regime, what kind of response could be from Ukrainian side, from European side, EU side. Minister is going to the EU Foreign Affairs Council soon. We will be discussing sanctions, accountability, how to bring perpetrators to justice, Lukashenko, but also all those involved in the war escalation. And we have many, many other topics to strengthen cooperation between our resistance, Belarusian democratic forces, and the Ukrainian government. And we see that Ukraine wants to support our movement.
But at this point, is Ukraine worried that the Belarusian army itself might be involved in an attack if Russia wants to open a new front, or just that Belarus could be used as a launching point?
We discussed that too. Belarusian army is not prepared, is not motivated. Majority of officers, they do support Ukraine. They do support independence of Belarus. They don't like what's happening in the country, that Belarus becomes the accomplice of Russian aggression. So we believe that most likely Russia will use Belarusian infrastructure and territory to provoke, not necessarily Ukraine. It could be Poland, Lithuania, Latvia as well, because Oreshnik strategic missiles deployed on Belarus, they are not threatening Ukraine because it's too short distance. They are threatening Central European, Western European countries, first of all. And we discussed how to raise awareness about Belarus right now in European capitals.
So actually, you're talking about opening not just a front with Ukraine, but potentially a front with NATO territory.
Yes, we discussed, but of course, European Union and NATO allies are prepared to that response. In recent years, Poland increased their capabilities significantly, and they will respond quickly if Russia will go for escalation. The same about Baltic states. But we must understand we are dealing with, crazy dictators who are not logical, who are not rational. And if Putin will like to raise stakes, he can make escalation, he can make provocations. Right now, what he's doing? He's doing blackmail. He's trying to show the muscles he doesn't have.
Franak, I want to take a look at the map right now just to show how significant this movement, this reported movement in Belarus is and why it's so significant. The Belarus border is, of course, the closest point to Ukraine's capital that Russia can or could attack from. It's where they sent in a huge armored column at the beginning of the full-scale invasion in 2022 to try and take Kyiv. And also, let's just point out, this is not anywhere near the main front line that is along the diagonal lines we see here in Ukraine's east and south, that Russian-occupied territory. So it seems that there's at least the potential for movement from Belarus toward Ukraine to significantly change the war. Franak, of course, Ukrainians themselves obviously remember that offensive from the north in 2022 and the threat to Kyiv. What have you been hearing, though, from your sources in Belarus about military movement there now?
Sure. If you could see on the map, it's like a balcony over Europe, over Poland, and Putin is not able to impose any significant threat to NATO countries or to Ukraine without controlling Belarus. Belarus is critically important for Russian army and for any form of war against the West if Putin decides to do so. We see that training military drills intensified in recent months. They conducted nuclear weapons training drill just last week. It was definitely the form of blackmail, primarily of the NATO allies. We see they modernized the Soviet infrastructure along Ukrainian, Polish, Lithuanian border, which can help, for example, for drones, for shells, for different types of missiles. Also, they improved communication along all the borders of Belarus. So Russians are preparing for something bigger. I don't say that the war will start, and I don't want to scare anyone tomorrow or even next month or year, but they are preparing for long-term resistance, confrontation with the West. They are not preparing for the peace or ceasefire. They are preparing for the war. Russians calmly, silently are doing their job, building infrastructure, and Belarus is key point in this Russian endeavor.
Franak, I want to take a listen to the latest warning from President Zelenskyy on this. He aimed it directly at Belarus, or at Lukashenko. Right after that, we'll play the response by Alexander Lukashenko. Just hang tight.
We have the capability to strengthen our defenses. We also have the capability to act preventively against Russian territory from where threats may emerge. The same applies to the leadership of Belarus. It must clearly understand that there will be consequences if aggressive actions against Ukraine or against our people are taken. As for Zelenskyy's statement that Belarus will be drawn into the conflict, I just said that it would be drawn in only in one scenario: if aggression is committed against our territory.
Franak, do you think that Alexander Lukashenko wants to be more involved in the war in Ukraine?
I think no one is asking Lukashenko. Lukashenko is just implementing orders he's receiving from the Kremlin. In 2022, when the full-scale invasion started, no one was asking about Lukashenko's opinion. Russia just used Belarusian territory to come to Kyiv, to attack western regions and northern regions of Ukraine. And that is how the full-scale invasion started. In Belarusian society, there is no support for the war. According to surveys we received last month, only 5 to 7% of Belarusians believe Belarus army must join Russian army against Ukraine. So what Russians are doing, they're just like using Belarus infrastructure and territory without asking Belarusian leadership, because they know that Lukashenko doesn't have any sovereignty, and Lukashenko will never say no to Putin, because his power depends entirely on Putin's goodwill.
How worried are you at this point that fighting could spread to Belarus?
I am very worried. Belarusians are worried. We don't want war. We want peace, and we want to stop Russia. And we see how Russia is cementing, fixing its control over Belarus by building military infrastructure and by imposing more and more control over Lukashenko and the whole political system. And of course, the only way to get rid of this control is to dismantle the regime. Because while Lukashenko is in power, he is in Minsk, there will be always threat of escalation of the new war against Ukraine, against Poland, Baltic states, because he is the pawn, Russian pawn. He is not a sovereign leader. And that is why if we, 5 years ago, when Sviatlana Tsikhanouskaya won elections in Belarus, and we won during the protests, probably this war would never have started. But we have what we have right now, and we have to deal with consequences. Now we have to get our country back. It's difficult, but we are happy to have Ukrainians now on our side too.
What can you, as the Belarusian opposition in exile, do, if anything, to stop this militarization through Russia?
We have to raise costs for the regime through sanctions, through isolation. So every produced shell or weapon for Russia will cost much more to make it difficult for the regime to gain money on this war. We have to bring Lukashenko, his cronies, to accountability. If the International Criminal Court opening cases against Lukashenko's officials, they will have much less motivation to participate in the war. We are trying to split elites, to work with those officers and officials in the system who support our ideas of democratic free Belarus, European Belarus, to get them on our side. And we have thousands of people inside the country, in underground and partisans who sabotage Russian railways, and we have to support them so much as possible. And finally, we have to fight for people's minds, for public opinion, to explain what's going on in Ukraine, because the dictatorship is trying to hide the truth. And thanks to independent media like Deutsche Welle, like Radio Free Europe and others, Belarusians receive the honest news, the truth. And more people know the truth, less they will be supporting Russia.
Tell me a little bit more about your visit to Kyiv and how it is going and how this contributes to your plan to secure freedom in your country.
For us, it's historic visit. For us, it's a game-changing visit. For years, Ukraine was, I would say, ignoring Belarusian democratic forces. They were worried that any engagement with Tsikhanouskaya will provoke Lukashenko for escalation. But right now, Ukraine is much stronger. You see what's happening right now. They are hitting targets near Moscow, Ukrainians. And Lukashenko also realizes that if he will escalate, Zelensky's response could be very, very hard. Belarus is much closer, and the targets are much more accessible to Ukraine. And I think this forced Ukraine to take more strong stance, leadership role on Belarus right now. And this visit today convinced me that Ukraine will never forgive Lukashenko, will never forget his crimes, and will help us to make Belarus free. At least we heard it from Minister Sybiga. Tomorrow, Sviatlana Tsikhanouskaya meets President Zelenskyy. We meet all the leadership of the country, and everyone says the same. It's our national Ukrainian interest to get Belarus free, and I'm very happy about that.
Tsikhanouskaya said today, I believe, also that Belarus needs Ukraine to be free. Why is that?
Exactly. We think that the fates of Belarus and Ukraine are intertwined right now because we fight the same evil. And only when Ukraine will be strong, will be successful, will be victorious, and Russia will be weak, it will open the chance for Belarus. That's why for us, Belarusians, it's very important to support Ukraine. That's why so many Belarusian military volunteers are fighting for Ukraine. Today, Sviatlana Tsikhanouskaya, after getting off the train, first thing she did, she went to the cemetery where dozens of Belarusians fighting for Ukraine are buried. They are heroes for us because they sacrificed their lives for freedom, not only Ukraine, but also Belarus fighting for Ukraine. So you see, for us, it's more than just like political issue. It's a moral issue. We are the same front line. And today's Belarusian, Ukrainian opening, I think will inspire many people inside Belarus who were calm, were silent, were in underground last years. Now, feeling the support from Kyiv, they will be braver.
Franak Viacorka, Chief of Staff of Belarusian opposition leader Sviatlana Tsikhanouskaya, thank you for this conversation.
Thank you.
What do you think? Is Russia preparing to open a new front to the war? And is Belarus's fate tied to the fate of Ukraine? Let us know in the comments. And if you found this video useful, please hit the like button. And if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe.